Shudder Sundays, episode 31, Dead Male. We're going into this new crime thriller just released on Shudder not long ago. And before we get into things, Shudder, if you aren't familiar, it's sort of a all horror streaming service. I think the plans are about $7.50 a month, but they got everything from the classics to the new stuff to behind the screens documentaries. So if you do not have Shudder already, go grab it, watch movies like this, and then come back and we can discuss all these. So this week, Dead Male.
I believe I mislabeled a package. I'm wondering what course of action I could take.
It's digital too. We'll figure out where to redirect it.
And what if by chance you cannot?
That's when things get interesting.
So Dead Male released March 9th, 2024 at the South by Southwest Film Fest. After that, it went to, I believe, 9 different festivals all across the world. There was some in London, some in, I think Canada had one, and then, of course, a bunch in the States. But then it finally released April 18th, 2025 on Shudder. So this is a fairly new movie. This is directed by Joe Dubois, I think it is, and this is his second feature-length film. He did Bab in 2020, alongside the other director, Kyle McConaughey. They've teamed up before in the past, and I believe they have some more projects together. Also did his own directorial, I believe that was his debut as well, but it was called Sheep's Clothing. This came out in March of 2024. So they've worked together before on Bab. They did this, and I'm assuming they're going to continue working together. This movie is starring Sterling Macer Jr. as Josh, who, do you remember what he's in? He's in a movie that I really like.
Is he in something? He looked familiar when I was...
He plays Jumpin' in Where the Crawdads Sing.
Okay, never mind, not who I thought he was. I was going to say, is that the guy from This Is Us?
No, no.
Randall?
Well, that's Sterling K. Brown. So I when I was looking through the cast list, I was like, Sterling? No, not him. Also starring John Fleck as Trent, who had a part in Waterworld and The Naked Gun 2.5. And then rounding out sort of the main cast would be Thomas Boykin as Jasper, who actually played Lester in the Rob Zombie Monsters movie.
I think I knew that, actually. I thought he looked familiar. I've only watched that once when it was first put on Netflix. I haven't seen it in a while. That's fun.
Yep. So why don't you give us a short synopsis of Dead Male?
All right. Postal worker Jasper is known for being the best when it comes to deciphering mail with unknown addresses. One day, he comes across a bloodied handwritten note where the writer was claiming to be kidnapped, only leaving the state road name involved on the letter. Unbeknownst, he becomes involved in a meticulous case that is deeper than he'll ever know.
So Shudder Skull rating. What is the Shudder Skull rating for Dead Male, if you remember?
The Shudder Skull rating for Dead Male is a 4.
4 out of 5 it is.
4 out of 5 skulls.
4 out of 5.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Rotten Tomatoes, when I checked, there was no audience score. Did you happen to see what the critic score was?
I did not look this time because last episode you told me to stop peeking at the Rotten Tomato score, so I did. But that's funny because even when I looked up some notes for this film, it didn't show any of the scores. So you said only the critic scores available?
Yeah, yep.
I would say maybe 71?
93%.
93? Oh my god, that's so
Rotten
good.
Tomatoes so
I was
far.
really... Okay, well, we'll get into it, but that makes me happy.
So some notes that I took throughout this movie. Obviously, this is also a spoiler warning. I'm going to kind of continue doing that, but especially for these newer movies, we do talk all spoilers here, so if you do not want to have anything spoiled, then watch this movie, come back, revisit it, and then we can kind of get talking. But some notes that I took throughout the movie... This one, I take ridiculous notes. Some mean stuff, some don't, but all I put was, okay, Brooks, Mr. Ponytail Man. It just reminded me of, what was that? In Jingle All the Way, when the radio host, he's trying to give away the Turbo Man, and you have Sinbad, okay, Mr. Ponytail Man. Like, all right, Brooks, the guy was, I thought he was going to have a little bit more of a role, but the way that this timeline of the movie shifts, he really...
I thought so too. I was going to say, it didn't really have a big plot line. Right?
No,
Yeah.
I mean, he was pretty... At the end, we'll get to it. He didn't have, like, a major part, really. Also, amazing insult from Renee, who is sort of the... Like, I kept referring to him as, like, a hacker, but he's really just kind of the information man. But there was a little back and forth where he insulted... It must have been Jasper, because that's really the only... Oh, no. It was just some other random person. But he told him that his his grandmother masturbates standing up.
Oh,
Thought
yeah,
that
I
was a
think it
really
was-
good insult. That was like his other buddy who was.
That was funny.
That was
Uh-huh.
the only scene you saw him in. But I made note that this was. I mean, right off the rip, the soundtrack was amazing. The score and it was just. It was so fitting. Obviously, you mentioned this takes place in the 80s. It's definitely a very different 80s than you're used to. When you think 80s, I think now with Stranger Things and everything, you're expecting the neons, the very high-pitched synthy, like synth wave, those bright colors, that Miami Vice style. This was very Midwest, like,
It seemed like late 70s, early 80s
Yeah.
kind of vibe,
Yeah.
which I liked.
yeah, it was very like mundane Midwest 80s. Everything was the color palette was very muted. It was just
Liminal, as one would say.
liminal, gross a little bit, but it came off really cool and very, very authentic. So the set design was just phenomenal throughout this whole movie.
It was.
Every little detail was just really, I think they honed in on that, and it really made the difference. There was a lot of really cool shots. I feel like they were able to, I don't want to say keep me entertained, because I was entertained, but the shot selection that they chose, the cinematographer, who I think one of the directors also shot this, but there was a lot of like up shots and like down shots, and it wasn't just a straightforward like movie. It actually, it looked very interesting the way they shot it. The reveal of Trent coming from the group home was very cool. They kind of did that immediately. So essentially, this movie starts out like right out of the gates, because it starts with Josh crawling to the mailbox.
It kind of starts with the middle ending as the beginning, kind of one of those things.
Yeah, the movie is chopped up. It starts with essentially a point in the movie that's about 80% into the movie. We forget that, and then we kind of backlog, and then we play catch up, and then at a certain point, the mid to halfway point, it kind of comes back and timelines realign. But it was the way we got introduced to Trent was really cool, because it was like a double swerve, right? When we first saw him attack Jasper, we're like, oh my god, that's his bunkmate from the home. Like, I remember him. And then you kind of go down the rabbit hole of like, oh, why was he okay, he sought him out. He was there for a reason. So it was a really cool storytelling technique that they did that for. I was curious why Trent was so obsessed with synths and like where all the money bankrolled from.
So I was too. That was the only thing that kind of confused me. When I had first watched this, I watched this one 2 times before us doing our Shudder Sunday. But I had to go back and watch it because I was like, how did Josh and Trent even meet? And they were at the synthesizer like convention is what it seemed like, which it looked like it was about 7 tables set up in like a small like hall. So, but I was like, yeah, how did they even meet at first too? And then I was like, he doesn't, like, it never said in the film if he was like into synths himself or he was just really into music and he was into that kind of like the woodwinds and stuff like that
yeah.
they kept talking about. So I thought that was, yeah.
Yeah, so essentially Trent is just like in love with synthesizer. He finds Josh, this guy who's just, it seems like he's working with his means. You know, he has the knowledge, but he doesn't have the materials to really fulfill his destiny in creating this woodwind synth. And he's got all the minds and the smarts and the abilities, he just doesn't have the materials. So Trent sort of steps in and bankrolls him and starts funding that project, essentially. Obviously, there's a weird shift in there. Josh takes a job in Japan with a rival company. That's why Trent gets all bent out of shape. And he actually captures him and locks him in his basement and forces him to, I guess, just work there and finish the job and not go to Japan. I don't know what, I mean, I guess...
Complete the project that they were trying to do.
Yeah, I guess in the 80s it was a little bit more... harder to trace where somebody is. I don't know if people would just assume he ended up just going to Japan or he just died or...
So that was another thing too. It didn't really, I was trying to count it because when he was on the phone or when he was talking to Trent before he got kidnapped, he was like, oh, like I'm leaving in a week, like Trent, you gotta get me out of here. And I was like, how long did he actually like have him kidnapped?
Yeah, there wasn't, so that was my next there was an amazing, I love match cuts. So there was a cut that Josh was laying on the ground, and then same frame, it cut immediately back to him laying on the ground, same spot, but this time like his beard was kind of grown in. So it did show that time had passed. We just don't know exactly how long time has passed. There's a point where obviously they get into a fight. Josh tries to burn the whole house down with one of the blowtorches, and he ends up being moved from the basement to the bathroom. And he chained him up and wired him close, but he put the chain around like the water pipe leading to the little ceramic
toilet.
sink.
Yeah. Oh, to the sink. Yeah.
I mean, you can't just like throw your body into the sink and knock that thing over.
Or
those things are very flimsy.
His feet were tied together, but it's not like his legs were crossed. I would have just laid on my back and tried to kick it in.
Yeah. I think you could have escaped from that little sink contraption or whatever, but I was really glad. So we saw at the very beginning Josh escape putting the mail in the mailbox, and then we finally catch up to that point where he knows Trent is his routine. He kind of comes and goes, and he leaves and he finally is able to escape, write a little note, and run down to the mailbox and drop it in. And I was really glad because Trent went back and tried with the blowtorch, and his plan was to burn all the letters in there. And that was, before he did that, I was like, oh, you got to just go like drop a match in there, burn it all. I was glad that they showed that, because that was like, oh God, I forget what we watched.
And he tried to pry it open with a crowbar at first too, and he tried like twice. And he was like, "Oh, this is gonna work."
Yeah, well, he went to go get the blowtorch, and then by the time he came out, the mailman was already there taking the stuff. So for me, I forget what Shudder Sunday we did recently. Something irritated me, and I was like, "Do this," and they never did it. But I forget. We do so many of these now at this point. But I'm glad that they did the thing that I was thinking to be like, to give me ease, that I was like, okay, he did try that. It wasn't just like, oh, dang it, it's in there.
Yeah.
Oh, well, he did attempt to do that. So it was just, this is kind of where we catch up to the front. We're sort of now reintroduced to the whole post office, dead mail, Jasper, and he goes in there and he just goes to the post office because he makes these calls. He's like, well, if I accidentally mailed something, where would it go? And he tracks it down to where this office is. And then the lady just serves Jasper up on a silver platter for him. He's like, oh yeah, all that stuff goes to our mastermind, Jasper. He's sort of a celebrity. Here he is.
He's right there.
He's right there. And he comes and goes. So this is how Trent kind of learns about who Jasper is. He follows him to the home, the shelter, I guess, essentially, that he stays at. Yeah. And
like a group home.
The group home. And this is where we pick up from the beginning part of the story. So I thought that was a really fun way to, like you said, foreshadow kind of where the story was going to be going to. So at that point, Trent does kind of like use the keys that he stole. He goes and he finds Jasper talking on the phone to Renee, and he's like, who are you talking to, blah, blah, blah. And then it's cool because we saw up to the point where he knocks him out. After that, I guess Bob, or Ponytail Man, whatever his name, was it Bob or?
Brooks,
Ponytail Man, comes in and like drills Trent in the back. But then somehow he's the one that's knocked out.
That's what I'm saying. He just did a little zzz. He should have friggin', if he saw Jasper was laying on the ground with his head gashed open, obviously this guy's up to no good. You might as well go for it.
Yep. So that one was a little like, okay. So he ends up just killing.
Useless.
Yeah, he kills both of them. But he frames it that Brooks died by suicide. So the police just marked it as a clear-cut case. Brooks, whatever, killed Jasper, then hung himself. Trent's kind of in the clear to go back to Josh and stuff like that. And then we kind of have a little bit of a pause in the story because I was like, oh man, is that just how it ends? Like, where's it go from here? We do find that Renee, who was on the line with Jasper, starts digging into this and starts kind of nailing it down. And I forget the two actresses I forget the character's name because they really weren't involved until the last like 15, 20 minutes, but they were co-workers of Jasper at the post office.
Anne, and I forget the other girl name.
Yeah.
Bess, maybe?
Maybe. But they kind of take it upon themselves. They work with Renee, and they end up tracking down Trent, and she just walks right into his house.
So it was cool how Renee tracked him down. So essentially, they went down County Road 119, tracked all the houses down, and then in the letter it also said that it was a white house, so they narrowed down all the white houses, this, and this, and there was like 5 or 6 people I think they had to go through, so she was going door to door, and yeah, basically Trent just let her in, but he remembered that he Yeah.
She actually saw him in the basement practice swinging a hammer. And then she goes to rush out of the house, which is all locked, and she finds Josh, like, hog-tied up, and
In the bathroom.
she decides to spend all of her time trying to release him. Which, like, you kind of gotta... Every man for themselves at that point.
I
Like,
would have helped too.
cops can come, but it was pretty convenient because Trent was planning on killing Josh with, like, rat poison, and it was pretty convenient that he was waiting until, like, that moment, and then she happens to show up. It's like, you didn't kill him, like, long ago. Like, there's no real reference of time in this. We don't know how long he's been there and stuff like that, but it does end sort of... I viewed it anticlimactically. Trent kind of knows he's one-upped. He essentially just goes, and he goes back to where Josh's original garage was, where he was working on the machine, and he decides to eat the poisoned food himself and kill himself while listening to synths. So that was kind of the notes that I kind of had going through this movie. Very, very fun, but let's get into the categories, unless you had anything else to add.
I really felt bad for Josh.
He definitely got screwed pretty hard.
He was such, like, a wholesome character, even just, like, the way he, like, acted. And that was the one thing about this movie. The acting in this movie was really, really good.
There's not a lot of bad in this movie.
No, there wasn't. And I feel like with how the theming and, like, the tone of the film was, I know you mentioned the soundtrack, too, the score mixed with the acting, mixed with everything, it was just, like, kind of had that, like, somber feel to it.
It was depressing a little bit.
But still kind of, like, anxiety-ridden, like that mystery-solving killer. So it was, it was good, yeah. But I think you kind of went over all the stuff I went over. But we can get in the categories.
All right, so then the good. What did you have for the good of Dead Male?
Again, love the score, the 80s synth, and with the different peaks and, like, highs and lows throughout the film and stuff like that in different scene sequences, the synthesized music and different tracks that they used to match up with those different scenes worked really, really well. I really like I know you mentioned this when we first put it on, but you said, like, the graininess kind of it with how it was shot, along with the cinematography being really cool. That added kind of, like, looked like a sepia kind of, like, filter on it, kind of that, like, tint to it, just worked really, really well. And I feel like sometimes a lot of people, directors more so, try to go with that, like, artsy, different kind of, like, style. For example, I watched Skinamarink again recently, and that's another one of those very grainy films that you could barely see anything, and they try to go for this cool aesthetic, and I feel like this one actually worked for what the movie was going for, so I really like that. Talked about the acting. I liked Trent in a sense. I don't feel like he was always meant to be this bad. I just feel like he was a very lonely man. Josh reminded him apparently of his ex-lover, Terry, from high school or from college that he met at university, that ended up leaving him too to go be in, like, Olympic track or whatever he did in high school, kind of something like that.
One of them did discus, one of them did
discus
javelin.
And stuff like that, and javelin, yeah, and so left him like that. So I guess he thought he found that companionship in Josh and finally had a friend in someone, and then turns out Josh is leaving him too, and he's like, oh man, can't let this guy go now. So it's kind of interesting how they took it to kind of see him spiraling and all this kind of stuff happening, because he is nice to it. It's not like he just locks him up and he fed him, he gave him all this cool new music stuff that was super expensive that he could work on since he'll be locked down there. Like, I mean, could have been worse, but still pretty bad in the sense. But he was a very complex character, and I like the way they executed him. What was some of your good?
The good was the score. Obviously, you talked about that, but the synth, it wasn't just like the typical, like, beep-a-dee-dee.
No.
It was like very
melodic.
Yeah, it was very deep tones, very one strut. It was like very analog-y, which was cool. It was shot very, very well. Not just the shot selection, but like we kind of mentioned, it had that almost like film Panavision style aesthetic. I couldn't, it's tricky with these newer movies that are, I guess it's an indie, but it's harder to track down like the information on this stuff. I didn't see a lot of interviews. I didn't have time to look up that deep, but I was trying to see what this was filmed on, like if it was filmed on actual film. But whether it was or wasn't, they achieved that look like in spades. And this thing it did keep me invested. It was a little bit of a slow burn,
Yes, I agree.
The middle, I feel like there was a big gap in the middle. It started out hot, and it ended okay-ish, but the middle was a little longer. But they did kind of move it from stages, which was nice. It went from the basement to the basement now being captured to him being up in the bathroom. It did move around a little bit, so it kept me invested. The acting, like you said, it's a minimal cast, but it's very well done, acted very well. I like the little side characters. Renee was a great addition, even though he really wasn't central to the plot. He wasn't really boots on the ground there, but he still had played a very pivotal role in that. So that's what I have for the good.
There was one little kind of Easter egg thing. Maybe it was me just trying to piece stuff together like that, but I don't know if you noticed, not to cut you off before we get into the other categories, but when Josh was locked in the basement, by the front door, there was a red, lantern kind of light.
Okay.
And it was like a Japanese, lantern. And I wonder if Trent had put that there, because it wasn't there previously.
I think he had.
Or maybe it was there.
That was there from the very
Oh, okay,
first
because I was
get-go.
going to say, if he put that there, being like, looks like you're not going to Japan.
Yeah,
Here's your Japan.
here's Japan, buddy.
Okay, that makes sense then. But I was just going to say, I thought that was a nice touch to
Yeah, yeah. So the bad then. What did you have for the bad of Dead Male?
I really didn't. I know I'm very easy to please, clearly, because I feel like a lot of my reviews that I do on here are always pretty positive for the most part, but not much bad that I had in this. I mean, yeah, it was a little bit of a slow burn. At first, I didn't think I would like the aspect of them doing so much foreshadowing at the beginning of the film, but honestly, I think it kept me intrigued for the whole watch time. This was only about an hour and 45 minutes, hour and 42 minutes, I think. And with what it was, I feel like this made for a really great piece of film. I mean, the storyline was good. It wasn't more of a horror. I wouldn't say this was very scary, per se, but it's real-life horrors, kidnapping, stuff like that can happen, obviously, and it does. But in its own, it was a little unsettling. So I really didn't have too much bad for this one.
So for me, I put Jasper. He's the most interesting person in this film, and we don't really get a lot of him.
Okay, that's a good one then. See, I wouldn't have thought of that. That is good.
Yeah, he's like we said, the one lady at the Pope's office treats him like a rock star, and he's just, you see him while he's on screen for the little bit of time he is, you see him, how his brain works and just making these connections and stuff like that, and being able to track all this stuff. I mean, he is just a detective, but not on the police force at all, essentially. I just don't think he was used as much because he was just such a good character, and it really was just very in and out. Him and Renee. They were both great characters, but they weren't really in the movie. It was really Trent and Josh.
That's a really good point, too. And you talking about Jasper's mind and watching how everything's going, too. We didn't get into really too much about what he actually does. So the dead mail letters and stuff that he deciphers is just letters that don't have a mailing address or numbers got mixed up or something. He has to try to figure them out. But there was also, in the beginning of the movie, there was a necklace, like a family heirloom necklace, I guess, that got lost in the mail and didn't have a return address, or it got messed up. And he went and read through the letter inside of the envelope and circled different words and put all this kind of stuff together and had Renee look up this person, probably living in this area, but they have a white Pontiac registered to their name. And it was really cool to see how it worked. And you have a great point that we really didn't get to see too much of him get to shine, because he was really good and his role was very enticing. So.
Yeah. I would have liked maybe a little bit of backstory on Trent, just in regards to why he's so obsessed with. Maybe he was more obsessed with Josh than he was the actual synth woodwork stuff, but I don't know for certain. I would have liked just a little bit more. I don't need a crazy backstory, but just a little something to show why he's obsessed with, and what he's obsessed with. Is he obsessed with Josh? Is it the synth? Is it, creating the next big synth? Is it that? I don't know exactly. And then the last moment was the resolution. I didn't think that the ending was very climactic.
I didn't mind the ending.
Yeah, I was just hoping for more of a victory for Josh. I mean, he got to leave, but Trent, just buggered off and killed and really inconvenienced Josh, because now Trent is dead in Josh's garage and he has to answer those questions as to, wait, if you were captured, how is your captor dead in your house?
least he's got the girl to back him up. He's got Anne to back him up, too.
Yeah, you know.
But still.
But yeah, like there was no police involved in this at all, so that was a little bit weird.
No,
They were just on the phone saying it's a dead case. You know, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, you know, the resolution I thought would have been more impactful of like, you know, Josh got to, you know, kill his captor or something like that. But Trent really just was in and out on his own terms.
Mm-hmm.
So top moment, what was your top moment of Dead Male?
So, even though you didn't like it very much, at the ending, it wasn't the climactic ending, but soon after Trent starts eating the chicken yakitori laced with rat poison, that was in the breading that he was originally made for Josh, he's listening, I guess, to 8-track tape that was played back that Josh had made
recorded.
for him, and Josh recorded for him, and made him feel like a real piece of shit. He's like, well, good thing I'm killing myself now, because Josh ended up finishing the piece, the synthesizer, and called it the Whittington
Woodwind or
Woodwind.
something? Named it after him?
Yeah, the Whittington Woodwind. Named it after Trent. His last name was Whittington, and he just sat there and he was like, well, I'm going to keep eating this now, so.
And it's like at that point, too, it's like, are you trying to get me to feel bad for Trent? Like he was the bad guy.
No,
like, you're
not
trying
at
to
all.
No, but like I feel like they're trying to build sympathy towards Trent. I'm like, oh, you know, no, he was the bad guy. Like, he captured Josh, he killed Jasper, he killed...
Well, they did make me kind of feel that way a little bit, like I was
Yeah,
saying.
but it's like, I'm not supposed to feel bad for him. He's the bad guy. My top moment I put when Trent kind of found and stalked Jasper, and that whole, like,
Those shots were really
montage
cool.
of, like, him picking it up, that he's going to this place, and it replayed a lot of the scenes from the beginning, but now when we see it that second time, we're like it makes sense, because even he like looks at, he's like, oh, the, you know, EP90, the epoxy.
Epoxy.
He's like, oh, you know epoxy. He's like, oh, I had a failed business venture. And now we know what the failed business venture was, obviously, because that was the same adhesive that he was letting Josh use for the synthesizer. I thought that was a really cool little gap of time in the movie that I liked seeing. So what would you change about Dead Male?
Like you said, a little bit more backstory or a little bit more screen time with Jasper would have been nice. I guess for that middle sequence of the film, it was a little anticlimactic, so maybe they could have added that backstory in there, but not too much I would change, really.
Yeah, I put the ending, not the outcome, but maybe the way we get there. Some sort of police presence, some sort of like even if there was a way to have Josh sort of save the day, like maybe Trent doesn't run out of the house and, you know, he ties up the woman and then Jasper gets free, and Jasper's the one that like is able to escape himself and kind of save the day. It kind of fulfilled Josh's storyline of just kind of having all that pent up aggression towards Trent. I think that could have paid out a little bit better, or even have like the friend who was sitting in the car. If like Trent's like going to leave, maybe with one of them, maybe she like pulls the car out and crashes into him and stops him. Like she didn't do anything.
She didn't do anything. I was wondering. I was like, did Trent kill her, or was she still sitting in the car in the driveway when he was pulling out behind her and waved
She's like,
by,
"See you
or
later."
what?
Yeah, because the other lady that went with the first woman to go into Trent's house, she's in the car just waiting for her. And I think the only other time we see her, she's like, "Oh no, don't go in," and like that was it. She doesn't really go to help. She doesn't. You can't really call to go get help then, but like she just kind of stays put, and we don't really see her again. But so that's kind of what I would change. So who is this for? Who would you recommend see Dead Male?
See, I feel like this was very clean cut. This is for anyone who likes a mystery thriller with the added ambiance of a wonderfully scored 80s, 70s kind of vibe.
I put, this is kind of like, it reminded me a lot of Longlegs mixed with Black Phone and a little bit of Saw, the original, but no torture. Just the captive aspect of it.
Okay.
But Longlegs and Black Phone, I think, are the ones that kind of are at the forefront of my mind when I was watching this movie. So our fear and beer scale, fear 1 through 5 of how scary this film was, and a beer rating 1 through 5 of how much you enjoyed this film. So your fear rating for Dead Male.
My fear rating for Dead Male was a 1.5.
Okay.
I was originally going to put it at 2, but it wasn't very scary. And in the sense, like we had said before, and we've prefaced this in some of our other episodes, that some of these horror films, even though Shudder is basically a horror streaming service, sometimes they aren't full-on horror as you
like
would think.
Jenny Penn.
Like Jenny Penn.
Yeah, so for my fear rating, I give it a 2.
Okay.
It is still in that like captive.
Yeah.
It's more of that thriller aspect, so it's not in your face scary.
Mystery crime.
There's a little bit of gore. There's definitely some kills, but nothing over the top or anything crazy like that. So your beer rating, 1 through 5. How much did you enjoy Dead Male?
I give this a 4.
A 4?
A 4 out of 5.
All right. I was close. I gave it a 3.5.
Nice.
I do like this one. The score was obvious, a strong point. It is interesting that I feel like with 80s nostalgia style stuff, it's very synth heavy, but this is like it took the synth aspect and put it into the story more than just throwing synths in there.
Exactly. It blended so well with the different scenes and how everything was flowing and just the different emotions that it was invoking through the synthesized music, which usually, like you said, it's very upbeat, usually very cool, but
Yeah, but I had a really good time with this. I will rewatch this, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, what did you think of Dead Male? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. On May 1st, we will be releasing the schedule for next month of Shudder Sundays. So be sure to tune in for that, and we'll see you soon.